Cal over here. We're gonna get a bit dark for this video. Just to preface, I love Outlast and Whistleblower, and I have the game on 3 different devices, so this video is more for me to yap about how much I like the game. Outlast is a survival horror game that was released in 2013, that had a DLC come out shortly after. In the game, you play as Miles Upshur and Wayland Park, an investigative journalist and former Murkoff software engineer turned whistleblower, as they both try to survive through Mount Massive, an asylum taken over by patients who had experiments done on them by a corrupt corporation called Murkoff. The asylum is dangerous, paranoia-inducing, and covered in gore. There's not a shortage of horror or trauma here, as every situation you end up in can result in death. It's quite a terrifying circumstance to be in, and many players, myself included, found the game to be a bit overwhelming playing it for the first time. The experience isn't for the weak, as there are many things the game has to offer that'll give you nightmares, and it still won't be the worst you see. Though I have been playing the game for years, I still find myself getting scared to this day. But what makes it still so horrifying and effective more than a decade later? Let's discuss. Outlast, as I've said before, takes place in Mount Massive Asylum. It's a lonely place in pretty much the middle of nowhere, Miles stating that he loses cell reception miles before even arriving at his destination. It's pretty secluded, with no one around but the trees to witness what's about to happen. The seclusion and detachment from the rest of society is eerie enough, but going into the asylum is when you start to see some issues. Big issues. In Outlast, you'll be playing in the dark for a huge portion of your run, with only your trusty night vision camcorder making it possible to see around you. The dark isn't the scariest part, as it's what can be easily missed when you're stuck in the thick of it. The lack of lighting in many places of the asylum makes for some scary moments where you're not sure if you'll run into someone who means to do you harm. Not everyone wants to hurt you, but because of the situation you're stuck in, there's much to be paranoid about anyway. You can never be too careful. You'll be constantly looking around, not sure if something or someone will pop out at you. I also find the human remains scattered about the asylum to be pretty unnerving. There are many traces of people being disemboweled or decapitated, with guts and heads strewn about the asylum. Jump scares are also plentiful, with bodies falling out of the sky and hanging torsos being shoved in your face. All this constantly makes death or being caught off guard all you can think about. Sure, you're alive now, but these pools of blood and guts means you could be next. Maybe in a few minutes, or maybe in a few seconds. With there being fates worse than death, I'd say there's a possibility of less than pleasant things that can happen to you in the asylum. I'd also say the remains of the soldiers at the beginning of the game is 1000% not a good sign. They're armed to the teeth and were still overpowered, while you were an average man with no weapons. If this isn't indicative of what is about to happen, I don't know what is. The asylum is huge, intimidating, and has many locations that offer their own hazards, such as 100-foot drops and collapsing floors. Things can change very quickly, but it seems like no matter how much you try to escape, you only get more stuck in the spider's web. The dark rooms, environmental hazards, and seemingly endless amounts of gore aren't the scariest parts of the game, however, as there are bigger fish to fry. Outlast is a bit different from other survival horrors. Instead of being armed with a gun or some kind of melee weapon, the game gives you a camcorder and says good luck. The only thing you can do to avoid death is to run, hide, or close a well-placed door. It's one of the first things the game tells you. The camcorder you have will help you navigate through the asylum's darkest hallways and rooms, as there's no shortage of them. In order to keep your night vision on, you'll need to collect batteries that can be found in odd places around Mount Massive. There is no fighting or self-defense, just running for your life and hiding in lockers or under beds. If you find a good desk to hide behind, that works too. Sometimes. Getting injured requires you to get far away from your pursuer, as being hit too many times in rapid succession will kill you. The screen will blur or turn red when you get hit, and depending on what your screen looks like, you may be able to take another hit before dying. The game also allows you to passively heal over time. This may seem very cut and dry, and it is, but these things can be harder to manage depending on the difficulty you're playing on. See, Outlast gives you the option to choose your difficulty, and it affects the game's mechanics and the enemy/varying AI to varying degrees. For example, playing on higher difficulties will only allow you to hold a few batteries at a time, and the batteries around the asylum will be scarcer and harder to find. You'll have to be more conservative with your batteries, and keep a closer eye on every nook and cranny to see if you can find a new one. Variants also behave differently. If the difficulty is higher, variants will become smarter and will search where you are much more thoroughly, making it difficult to get away with some of the things you would if you were playing, let's say, normal mode. It's also best to be very cautious, as variants are also stronger and can kill you much more quickly than before, it only taking a few hits to do the trick. If you want to play on higher difficulties, you gotta be on your A game and expect a one-hit kill to happen on occasion. There are 4 difficulties: normal, hard, nightmare, and insane mode. The first 3 difficulties are fine enough. Nightmare mode may be requiring some more knowledge on the map layout, but they're all doable. Insane mode, on the other hand, is a toughie. While all other modes support saving the game and loading back whenever you die, insane mode does not. You die once, and it's back to the very beginning of the game for you. Insane difficulty also pulls no punches. You can only hold 1 battery. Batteries around the asylum are basically non-existent. consistent, and enemies are sharper and stronger than ever. It's safe to say that getting hit once is the end for you. It takes quite a bit of knowledge and gameplay experience to beat this mode, but knowing that one screw up can end your run is terrifying. As soon as you see the soldier impaled on a metal beam and decapitated heads lined up on the shelves like trophies, you think one thing. Who did this? In Outlast 1 and Whistleblower, there are several answers. Variants are patients from Mount Master that pursue you with the intention of killing you, all of them being unique in their motivations and design. Some variants lack clear names and identities, but still offer the same if not more stress to the player. Despite the more iconic variants all being extremely violent, the one I have the most trouble with is the one that'll chase you while you're trying to find laundry fuses. He's quick and is honestly more up your ass than even the stubborn Chris Walker. Anyway, tangent over, some variants appear more often than the others and cause more trouble for you, while others may technically not be as much of a threat, but still extremely dangerous to be around. There will be 6 well-known variants I'll be talking about, with 4 from Outlast 1 and 2 from Whistleblower. Let's get this party started! Chris Walker is a variant that pursues you through much of Outlast 1 and a few brief moments in Whistleblower. He is a very big, tall man, probably 7 feet tall and 400 pounds, with chains wrapped around his legs. He only wears a pair of pants that are splattered in blood, and lacks any lips or nose due to him tearing them off. He looks more like a monster than a human being. He's absolutely relentless with how often he goes out of his way to find and kill you. From the first 10 minutes of the game to like the last 15, he's pursuing you every chance he gets. He also appears when you need to specifically go somewhere or where you need to press valves to progress further into the game. Chris Walker used to be a soldier in Afghanistan before he started working at Mount Massive as a security guard. However, Chris went crazy weekend killing other workers, only being subdued when he was hit by a car, thrown into the asylum as a patient to cover up his crimes. Chris was already abnormally strong, but after being contained in the asylum and experimented on, he became a lot stronger. The first time the player sees Chris, he will be grabbing you and throwing you out of a glass window with ease. That's not the most interesting or terrifying thing about him. He's possibly the smartest and most conscious variant I'll be talking about, as he's naturally more thorough in his pursuit of you. Him being much stronger than any other human variant is made clear by how he busts down doors. When a variant is met with a closed door, they bust it down, and for the average variant, it takes 6 hits to the door to break it down. Chris only needs 3. At least for more intense moments where you need to think quicker since he'll be in the room quicker than anyone else. He's always around, there to scare the hell out of you and impede your progress. Chris's methods of killing you are also quite brutal. One method he uses is punching you to death like Nemesis and cracking your skull open. Another method is by picking you up and throwing you down. Being thrown on the ground can kill you if it's not your first time being injured, but you may be able to scamper away if it is. However, if you get thrown into a wall or the edge of a bed, your neck breaks and you die instantly. That's what I'm assuming happens anyway. One more move he'll pull is picking you up and proceeding to rip your head off. Obviously an insta-kill, so if he picks you up, you better hope he's throwing you somewhere. He's pretty scary to run into in harder difficulties because of this, due to how he'll usually just instantly kill you if he so much as touches you. He's also very paranoid, sometimes randomly turning around and stopping or even changing directions when you least expect it. Even until the end of the game he's trying to kill you, and the only thing that stops him is being eaten by a bigger fish, aka the Wall Rider. The Wall Rider ends up throwing him around like a ragdoll before shoving him into a vent so hard his body is shredded. Though an extremely satisfying death, it's a bit sad due to how he's trying to keep the Wall Rider from having a host, murdering anyone who seems like a good candidate. Of course the way he went about it is terrible, but he had his heart in the right place. Still a jackass though. And now you have to deal with something much more dangerous than him. Yay! Not much is known about the twins, and you don't see them much throughout the game at all. Despite this, I'd say they're the most off-putting killers in the game. They don't kill for a purpose other than for pleasure, and seem to know what they're doing. They're very conscious of their choices and seem much more observant, even calling out Miles hopping out of a window to avoid them. They're quiet, determined killers, rarely making noise as they hunt you down. They don't speak while on the hunt, almost as if they share a brain. It's pretty creepy. They're also completely naked, which is its own kind of horror. They only appear sometimes, not nearly as much as Chris Walker, but the chance of running into these silent killers again can be something in the back of your mind. In different circumstances, it would probably be much easier for them to kill you. Rick Traeger was a former executive at Mount Massive before he was admitted as a patient and lost his mind as a result. He's fairly average, probably only slightly taller than Miles in all bones, the outline of his ribcage being more apparent than his receding hairline. He only wears an apron around his waist, so you might see his bare ass cheeks here and there. Most terrifying thing about him, honestly. He carries a giant pair of shears as a weapon, making him look like a wannabe Kill la Kill character. With these shears, he'll use them to injure you, either slicing your throat or impaling you from behind. While getting chased by 3 violent variants trying to kill you, he offers you a helping hand through the form of a dumbwaiter, pretending he's an ally as he narrowly saves your life. As soon as you arrive in front of him, he punches you hard and subdues you, sitting you in a wheelchair and strapping your arms to it. After wheeling you through his ward of terror where you'll see countless patients strapped to beds and screaming for help, you arrive in a bathroom. He cuts off 2 of your fingers, and after leaving, you escape from the chair and make a plan to escape. Getting out is important, as you'll lose a lot more than your fingers if you stay put. Trigger's procedure of torturing the people who comes across is as follows. First, he removes your fingers, then your balls, then your tongue. Not something I'd want to stick around for. After leaving the room, Trigger will start pursuing you, and through his dialogue to himself, you'll learn that he's a white-collar, frat boy, business major douchebag. He's the absolute worst, and if you read the Outlast comics, you'll learn that there's a reason why he pursues you without your consent. Like I've said before, I played Outlast 1 about 30 times, so I often speed through the game. On my 14th playthrough, I put my strategy into action. I like to play it safe, so I usually provoke Trigger to chase me from this room to this room, close the door in his face, and while he's breaking it down, I use this time to move an object out of the way of the door I need to go through. But Trigger's a clever bastard, and when I thought I had it all figured out, he suddenly appeared behind me when he was supposed to be breaking down a door. It scared the shit out of me, and I ended up dying due to how frazzled I was. Turns out since there are doors with windows in this area of the asylum, Trigger watches what you do before he commits. If you stay near the door, he busts it down, but if you move too far away from the door, he runs out of the room he's in to cut you off. Seeing this for the first time honestly almost gave me a heart attack. After finding a key to the elevator, you'll begin moving down until Trigger appears on the bottom floor, opens the grate, and tries to stab you. I guess Miles had enough of getting his ass beat and not defending himself, so he pushes Trigger back far enough to where he gets crushed between the elevator ceiling and one of the floors, Final Destination style. Trigger's dead, Miles is happy, and life moves on. Trigger is one of the variants you love to hate, as he's one of the only variants to cause permanent damage to you. He's a real asshole with no redeeming qualities, and it makes his death that much more satisfying. This quote-unquote variant reminds me a bit of the creatures in Resident Evil simply by premise alone. Like, hey, you know that unstoppable, unkillable, impossible to control creature we've been developing? Good news, it has a host that can be controlled. Bad news is brutally murdering everyone. The Walrider, or the Swarm, is a cloud of nanites that possesses extremely great and dangerous power. The Walrider can overpower anyone and anything, even killing the once untouchable Chris Walker with ease. Conjuring the Walrider was the goal from work of executives, scientists, and doctors, as only one who's seen enough horrors can host it. Even so, the Walrider is too powerful to contain safely, as it ended up killing many people in the asylum, patients, soldiers, and work-off employees alike. In-game, the Walrider is not only very fast, but can go underneath doors rather than busting it down. It can also fly, making it harder to get away from it. Since the Walrider is made of nanites, you can't see it with the naked eye, you can only see it through night vision. However, you'll be able to see the blurry dark cloud around it if you're close enough, but at that point it'd be too late. Even the area in which you face the Walrider is scary in its own way. It's eerily quiet, there's blood and entrails everywhere, and a feeling of impending doom. The player will already be accustomed to the dark, grungy feeling of the asylum, only to be met with an environment alien to you. It almost feels as if you're on another planet entirely, with the white ice-like walls overwhelming you as you cautiously move through it. Even then, the environment is just as, if not 100 times more perilous than the ones that came before it. There are scientists, doctors, guards, and military soldiers alike ripped to shreds, and the assumption is that they would know how to handle the situation better than you, an outsider. The scientific equipment covered in blood only further proves my point. It's a terrifying revelation. When your anxiety reaches its peak, you'll be met with blaring sirens in the dark end of a hall, with the Walrider appearing before you. The Walrider is truly a force to be reckoned with, as if it catches you, it'll go into your body and expand it, making you explode. Not a pretty sight. The only way you'll end up getting the upper hand on the Walrider is to kill Billy, its present host, but even this backfires. After successfully killing Billy, Miles is immediately possessed by the Walrider and is not in good shape. It's pretty terrifying, as the Walrider can very easily kill you, but chooses you as its next host. Not the most ideal situation, but at least you're not dead yet. Frank Monero plays a minor role as a variant in Whistleblower, but he's still pretty dangerous. Frank is a patient at Mount Master that cannibalizes anyone he sees, and though he has plenty of food around, he chooses to chase you in the hopes of eating you. Frank is lanky, greasy looking, and often screams at the top of his lungs about eating you. He carries around a circular saw, something he uses to kill you and I'm pretty sure dismember you post-mortem. He gives you quite a few scares, throwing you into a cremator and all. Not much can be said about Frank, as not much is known, but he definitely makes for the most unhinged variant until we get to our next one. Eddie Gluskin is a patient at Mount Mastiff and was a serial killer before he was brought in. He's extremely tall, well-built, and dressed in a self-tailored groom's suit, down to the slacks and vest. He carries the knife around with him, ready to slice and dice his next bride. The most terrifying thing about Gluskin is the reputation he gains almost immediately after the asylum falls into ruin. The player will see Gluskin at the very beginning of the DLC as he begs you to help him as you're fixing the engine he's about to be forcefully shoved in. Obviously he can't help him and he's pulled away. I assume a few hours passes by after this encounter and he starts wandering around the asylum killing patients with the kind of brutality that can only be imagined. By the time you meet him, it would have been a short period of time since the patients escaped, probably about an hour or two, and he already has a terrifying reputation. Man downstairs and the groom are both eerie nicknames he's given. When he catches patients, he tries to turn them into the perfect bride, often cutting off their genitalia with blades and buzzsaws. The first taste you get of the kind of person he is when you walk downstairs and stumble upon a man's body with a giant hole where his genitals should be, and a human skull sticking out of it. One thing is clear, he must have been an art kid. The first time you see him, he appears behind a locked door and presses his face against the glass in excitement, obviously happy to see you. It's a miracle that the door was locked, or you would have been walking straight into death itself. Since there are no female patients at Mount Massive, he'll only encounter male ones, but his delusional state convinces him that there are women he can try to pursue romantically. He wants a traditional love like the one from old movies and TV shows like the 50s, 60s era, a white picket fence, a housewife, and children, but he has a uniquely violent way of going about it. Gluskin perfectly cosplays how many men from the 60s treated their wives. He's deeply misogynistic, violent, insecure, aggressive, and reacts very badly to being rejected. 3 words. Scariest shit ever. This might be a bit odd to say, but in this situation you really do feel like a woman with how he's projecting onto you. You're vulnerable, weak, and scared, not knowing what to do as if damned if you do and damned if you don't. Especially after grievously injuring your leg after falling down an elevator shaft. He'll kill you no matter what, and the situation has some parallels to an abusive relationship. Rejecting someone who's obsessed with you can lead to you getting stalked and killed, but accepting them into your life and playing along with them won't have very different results. Enough parallels though. It's very clear he hates women, and considering he believes you're one, it's no wonder why he's treating you the way he is. He's sweet and charming at first to lure you in, but after being rejected he becomes enraged and extremely violent, calling you all types of derogatory terms. He switches between the ideal, doting suitor to aggressive killer very quickly. Even his quote-unquote nice dialogue is extremely creepy, usually involving him saying he wants to impregnate you. In this section of the game, your leg is basically broken, causing you to lift from one place to another with Gluskin mercilessly pursuing you. Any mistake is fatal, and it can feel terrifying to hear him shouting behind you as you barely make it to safety. There are wedding dresses and words written in blood on the walls, all talking about a woman's sacrifice and family. Gluskin knocks you out inside of a locker, where you'll begin to witness his sadistic method of fixing up his brides, aka giving them a free castration. Yeah, for some reason, some Outlast antagonists love to do that. I assume that Gluskin's procedure for fixing his brides not only stemmed from his hatred of women, but from his hatred of particular genitalia due to his childhood trauma. It's my theory anyway. Other men that he chased before you weren't so lucky, as they were all hung on the gymnasium ceiling without their penises. There's at least 100 of them, and considering that it's only been 12 hours since you passed out, Gluskin must have really got to work. The corpses strewn about on the ceiling is a horrific sight, and it could be you. It actually almost is you, due to Gluskin catching up to you and attempting to hang you up there by your neck. Waylon struggles down, Gluskin's leg gets caught in his own contraption, and he gets pulled up and impaled on a metal beam hanging from the ceiling. It's a very sudden death, but so satisfying. All the variants from Outlast are all scary in their own ways, but one thing they all have in common is being experimented on by Murkoff. Murkoff took advantage and used all these variants in differing ways for their own gain, which leads me into my next point. Murkoff is run by morally bankrupt, dangerous, and sadistic people with no regard for human life and lack basic empathy. The asylum experiments aren't the only awful thing Murkoff has done, as they're directly involved in MKUltra as seen in the Outlast trials. The whole situation is much bigger than a billion-dollar corporation taking advantage of the mentally ill and disabled, as they have their fingers in all sorts of pies. They're involved in the government, police, and military, making them a giant force to go against. Employees of Murkoff aren't exactly known for their kindness, with Jeremy Blair, the head of Mount Massive and the Wallrider Project, attempting to murder Waylon twice. Murkoff is perfectly content with using, manipulating, and further traumatizing vulnerable people to get what they want, whether it be the mentally ill or people who feel like they have no place in society. The morphogenic engine acts very quickly, many variants including Eddie Gluskin being completely consumed by the machine that breaks their minds in mere moments. As Waylon says in one of his notes, not every patient was a murderer or the least bit violent until Murkoff broke them down in the worst way possible. No matter how evil, Murkoff is extremely powerful and only cares to further their own agendas, even if it means killing and destroying people. Waylon may have escaped Mount Massive with his life, but he'll have to constantly look over his shoulder and wonder if it's his or his family's last day on planet Earth. Murkoff is relentless, cold, and calculating, ensuring their reputation and profits are kept safe at all costs. They're definitely the scariest force in all of Outlast, judging by how they're just regular, power-hungry people without moral compasses, much like most billion-dollar corporations in the world. Yap such finally done. Outlast is full of horrors, and though some of them may be hard to comprehend, I still love the games. It's been a game I've been following since I was 12 and been playing since I was 13. Maybe not the most appropriate age, but who cares? Outlast manages to still be my favorite horror game of all time, and it's something I can play every day and not get tired of. The game, funnily enough, gives me comfort. The atmosphere, variance, music, and overall horror factor is unmatched in my opinion. What do you think? Do you have something to add? Let me know in the comments. This is Cat Lover, it's been real. Peace.